Baylor and Houston, a 1 versus 2 seed, meeting in the first Final Four matchup on Saturday on CBS. The Bears a year removed from being a top seed before the NCAA tournament was called off, and 71 years removed from their last Final Four appearance. Now they are 5-point favorites as they face their state rivals, with a chance for their one shining moment set to possibly come on Monday night. This is the 5th in-state Final Four matchup in tournament history. It's the first all-Texas one. Only Houston did play TCU in the Elite Eight back in 1968 and played SMU in the 1967 Elite Eight. And for more on the matchup, let's send you out to Hakeem Dermish and the team, nice and toasty warm in Indianapolis.
Jeremy, thank you. And the only team from the state of Texas to win a national championship, that groundbreaking team from Texas Western back in 1966, led by head coach Don Haskins. Of course, they beat Kentucky 55 years ago. And one of these Texas teams, whether it be Houston or Baylor, going to try to knock off either Gonzaga or UCLA. We'll wait to find out Saturday night. But it is pretty incredible to have the first all-Texas Final Four matchup. And you look at how both of these teams got here, Tim. You first look at Houston, right? They play 4 double-digit seeds. First time in any NCAA tournament. They really had no business beating Rutgers. They find a way to win. Then they take on a couple of teams with zone defenses in Syracuse and Oregon State, and they're able to break through. When you look at Houston's path to the Final Four, what stands out to you?
Well, they've been fortunate, right? And a lot had to do with their draw, but you still got to go out there and beat those teams. You know, Syracuse is playing highly effective basketball. They were playing the zone. You couldn't have run into a hotter team in Oregon State, and they figured out how to win those games. I still think, Coach, we haven't even seen the best of Houston. I don't think they've put it all together. They've done some enough to eke out wins, but they kind of had that Undertaker gift moment where they were dead against Rutgers. I mean, they were dead. That game was over. You figure out a way to win, and when you think back on past NCAA tournaments, right, whether it's Tyus Edney making that shot against Missouri when he was on UCLA or Leitner's shot against Kentucky, when you have a moment like that or that massive comeback, traditionally, that does propel a team. We've seen it before. But, yeah, the path has really been. But the matchup against Syracuse and Oregon State, they figured out ways to win. It always necessarily wasn't pretty, Coach. But I think their best basketball is still ahead of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And against Oregon State, they almost lost that game because of a 1-3-1 half-court zone, which basically stymied their entire offense. Calvin Sampson had to burn a couple of timeouts, but they were able to overcome that. But the reason why, Tim, Hakeem, they're here is because of rebounding. Yep. This is an extraordinary rebounding, physical team. And if you do not match their physicality, it's going to be over. Because they're bigs inside. They're not the most overpowering guys. There's no Hunter Dickerson 7-1 guy, but they're relentless. I had a chance even last year to attend a couple of Calvin Sampson practices, and they put a lid on the basket, and there's really no makes in practice. It's all misses, and they carry over that physicality and that rebounding into game.
So then when they get into the game, they're surprised that the ball goes in the bucket because they got the lid on the bucket, and they're going to have a tough time in terms of defending the best three-point shooting team in the nation in Baylor, but we've had to see Baylor win in different ways, right? We saw them against Villanova. They only made 3 threes in that game, but they had 16 turnovers, and that speaks to that 40 turnover margin, the plus 40 turnover margin for Baylor. This team will get after you in a multitude of ways, Tim.
Well, I think great teams can win different ways, right? You want to play fast? Baylor can play fast. They lead the country in three-point shooting. They're shooting 41%. I would be most concerned with, if I was Kelvin Sampson, with guarding the three. I'd make them make twos, because once they get into that rhythm from an offensive standpoint, shooting the three, now they become impossible to guard. Now they get you in pick and rolls. Now they're throwing alley-oops. Like, I would tell our guys, we're going to have 2 feet above the three-point line. We're not going to give up any threes to these guys. Force them into help. Force them into – and that's what Villanova did well. And that's why Villanova was winning at the half. I think you got to run them off that three-point line. I think Houston has an advantage. I do think they're more physical than Baylor, but Baylor is more athletic. I think they match up well with Baylor.
Well, I believe, and I agree with you, it's all about the three-point shot, and it starts in transition. Baylor, when they're clicking, it's, Jared Butler walking into a transition three, Teague. But then it transfers into their half-court offense. They move the ball around, run their pick-and-roll set, drive and kick, and it's a three-point shot. Or it's an offensive rebound. And their offensive rebounds doesn't always lead to putbacks, but their offensive rebounds lead to kickouts. Then Jared Butler makes a Steph Curry, 30-foot three.
How would you guard that, though? Like, put yourself in those shoes. How would you guard the guys on Baylor?
Well, the guys on Baylor, your transition defense starts 3 or 4 steps above the three-point line. If you wait for Baylor inside the three-point line, they'll make you pay the price. But I think part of guarding them is running really good offense so that you can be in position to have good transition defense and get your defense set. But if you're turning the ball over or if you're taking bad shots on offense, this team will make you pay just like Gonzaga.
Yeah, that's what happened against Villanova. Villanova started throwing the ball away, and it was really an 11-minute mark to the 4-minute mark where they just blew the game. They were 1 of 5 from the field. They had 5 turnovers, and the game was over. So you got to take care of the basketball, and you got to watch the three-point line.
And, Coach, one of the matchups that we're going to be watching is who Calvin Sampson is going to put DeJon Jarreau on. What's the assignment going to be for him? He's got to go against that trifecta. Is it going to be Jared Butler, the Big 12 Player of the Year? Is it going to be Macio Teague or Davion Mitchell, the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, and the Naismith Defensive Player of the Year? So what's the assignment? If you're Calvin Sampson, who are you putting Jarreau on?
Well, if I'm Kelvin Sampson, it's funny, I've gotten this question 15 times today. I'm putting my homeboy from New Orleans, DeJon Jarreau, I'm putting him on Jared Butler. Because I think at the end of the day, if you can eliminate Jared Butler's production or really minimize his production, maybe, single digits, 6 or 8 points, that really bodes well for your team to have an opportunity to win. I think Davion Mitchell, with the way he's more aggressive to drive to the basket, that could be problematic, Tim, for a guy like Jarreau in terms of foul trouble. And if Jarreau gets in foul trouble, that's a problem for the Houston Cougars. So I would tend to lean towards putting Jarreau on Jared Butler.
Yeah, I mean, Jarreau, I think, is going to end up being the X factor because defensively he's been so good in this tournament. Obviously shut down Buddy Boeheim. Yep. I mean, the guy made 1 3 in the game, and he was really rolling offensively. And then from an offensive standpoint, Jarreau, last 2 games almost had triple doubles.
Yeah.
So, like Coach is saying, you almost got to be like, we also got to protect him because he has to be on the floor and an aggressive driver. I'm not the one to talk about defense, okay? I was more of an offensive guy, facilitator. Right. I'm going to let Coach take the defensive assignments going forward, all right, Akeem?
Yeah, when you talk about the best players on this team, and both have incredible players to help them get here, you have Quentin Grimes, the American Athletic Conference Player of the Year. You have Jared Butler, the Big 12 Player of the Year. You recruited Jared Butler to Alabama, and then he, of course, transferred to Baylor. What kind of player is he? How have you seen him develop there in Waco?
Well, it's funny, Hakeem. It's not just Jared Butler. You had Davion Mitchell, who started off with Auburn.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So he got 2 guys that started off in the state of Alabama and transferred to Baylor. But I remember watching Jared Butler because he's from right outside of New Orleans. I remember watching him, when he was a freshman and sophomore in high school. And he only had offers from southeastern Louisiana, Nichols State. And I was like, wow, this kid doesn't have a Power 5 offer. What are these coaches looking at? He has high basketball IQ. He played quarterback and wide receiver in high school.
You like that he played multiple sports?
I love that. I love multiple sport players. And then, he's a kid, unbelievable footwork. His family, great folks, educated people. So I looked at him, and especially his three-point range. Mm-hmm. He had that type of, again, I'm going back to it, that Steph Curry type of easy release from, a couple of feet behind the three-point line that I thought was rare and was a rare gift that I thought could really translate to not only collegiate basketball, but also to the NBA.
Also a nice young man off the court as well, teaches Sunday school in Waco, and he's going to look to teach Houston a little school on Saturday night and try to get to the national championship game. And you take a look at what Scott Drew has built in Waco. Of course, took over the program in 2003. It was under NCAA sanctions, really a scandal going on there. And he has rebuilt this program now in the Final Four for the first time in 71 years. He's been Big 12 Coach of the Year past 2 seasons. When you look at what Scott Drew has done, Tim, what stands out to you?
He built an identity through defense and rebounding. Now, this team is his most explosive offensive team. This is his most balanced team, and that's why they're in a Final Four right now, because his other teams were like crazy on the boards, block shots, impossible to score against. But his energy is so infectious. Is he ever in a bad mood?
No.
Like, he's like always happy. And you want to know something? I think kids now respond better to that than maybe our uncles or our daddies or granddaddies used to just yell at us because they had some sort of military background. Kids now don't want to be yelled at. They want to tell how great they are. And then when they screw up, it's like, you screwed up, but you did do this well. And I think we could all learn something from that. Look, he's even smiling at his picture, for crying out loud. Like, that. People respond better now. I prefer to get yelled at. If I have a bad segment, I want Dane off here to the side to yell at me, kick me in the butt. I want Akeem to kick me in the butt. Like, I don't want to be told, like, great segment. No. If it's bad, it's bad. But Scott Drew's got great infectious energy, and what we're going to look back on with the scandal and what was going on and what he did with the program, really nothing short of a miracle.
And you talk about the other coach, Kelvin Sampson at Houston. He's resuscitated his career, dealt with some sanctions, of course, NCAA violations, both at Oklahoma and Indiana. What's interesting, though, is most of the rules that he broke are no longer NCAA violations in terms of contacting recruits. Goes to the NBA, comes back, goes to Houston in 2014, and he gets them to the Final Four, also took Oklahoma to the Final Four, and he's got his son Kellen as one of his assistants. When you look at the path that Kelvin Sampson has had here, Avery, how impressive is it to get this Houston team to the Final Four?
Yeah, you know, Washington State, he was an assistant at Michigan State. As you said, Oklahoma, Indiana. I think the reason why Kelvin Sampson is here, and he shared it earlier on CBS Sports Network, was it's all about a family affair. He has his son as a, assistant head coach. His daughter is over basketball operations. The kids love his wife. The parents trust him, and they trust his family. And when it can be a family affair, and again, the players understand that Kelvin really loves them. He's a different personality, Tim, than Scott Drew. I've been in Kelvin Sampson's practice.
Like how?
He's really tough on the kids.
Yeah.
And he gets on them really, extremely hard in practice. There's no let up. He's relentless in terms of the fundamentals and the expectations, and he wants competitive spirit on every drill. And if there's 4 or 5 guys not on the floor for a loose ball, he stops practices. Everybody has to run. And if you give up an offensive rebound, that's a no-no. But he wants offensive rebounds. So his coach is a little bit different. He's more from the old school. The kids that he recruits, they want that type of coaching, and it's translated into winning in their first Final Four in a long time.
Who's winning the game?
A lot of my Baylor friends will not like this, but I picked Houston and Gonzaga to play in the final game, and I got to stick with it. So I'm going with Houston by a point.
Brought my red shades for a reason, okay? I have Houston in my – I don't have many things right in my bracket.
Did those glasses belong to Rose?
My daughter? No, they didn't, okay?
Right.
I don't have many things right in my bracket, but I do have Houston playing in the national championship game. And the fact that I'm going to get 5 points, I'll take the 5 points because I think this is going to be a low possession, low scoring game. These did not cost much money, but I think it's going to be one of those games that come right down to why. I think it's going to be really physical, really aggressive, really athletic. But the fact that you're going to give me 5, I'll take all those points. I think that's different in the game.
Yeah, Baylor a 5-point favorite. They're 8-0 against the spread when favored by 8 points or less. So give me Baylor because I'm rooting for the Baylor-Gonzaga national championship game, 1 versus 2.
Want these? I got shades for you if you want them. You don't want those?
I don't need that. I'm going against you guys because my Final Four bracket's better than yours anyway. The BFFs, Tim Doyle, Avery Johnson, Akeem Dermish from Indianapolis as we await Saturday night's games. It's going to be a heck of a night here in Indy. Let's send it back to you.
Get the heaters out.
Thank you very much, Hakeem. Don't forget, Tim also brought his hammer. At least he didn't throw that at you. Yes, the game's underway starting at 5:14 p.m. Eastern Time on Saturday with Houston and Baylor kicking off first. As mentioned, the guys saying Baylor 5-point favorites. And if you want to catch all the action while you're on the go, be sure to download the March Madness Live app. You can catch both games there on Saturday.
Want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.